Hi, I'm Sylvie from High Level Bandanas, and today we are making a loungewear set custom. So basically you guys are gonna learn how to draft your own pattern based on clothes you've already got. So like these shorts are just based off of measurements from a little pair of sleep shorts I already had, and this sweater off of a sweater I already had. This tutorial is super beginner friendly. I still consider myself a beginner at sewing, especially when it comes to drafting patterns. And before we get into it, here's some materials that you're gonna need. I'm usually a size small, and I used about 1.5 yards of this really nice fleece fabric that I got from Fabricland. Also from Fabricland, I got this lovely knit stretch fabric. I used maybe 1/2 yard or 1/2 meter. I don't even know why I'm saying yards. I go in meters. 1.5 meters of this, 1/2 meter of this. If you are a larger size, maybe go for 2.5 just to be sure, especially if the fabric is on sale. Just grab more because you never know. You'll want some elastic. I think it's 3/8 of an inch. So 3/8 of an inch thick elastic is what I used. If you plan on doing a rolled elastic waistband, however, you can go for a thicker elastic if you'd like. And is that pretty much everything that I used? You'll need a ruler, paper, a pencil, patience. No patience, we just do. So let's get right into making the sweater. You guys are gonna get floor view, and don't mind my hair, I just washed it. From this point onwards, it is 24 days until I move into my house. You won't have floor view of my parents' house anymore. Now, let's get to making a pattern. So we're gonna get started by folding the sweater in half so that we can draft up the front of the sweater. I've gone ahead and I have taped my pieces of paper so that it covers the front of this sweater perfectly, placing the paper exactly where this ends. And I'm gonna be tracing the neck first. We don't want to trace this stretchy part yet. All we wanna do is trace this outside section. And I'm gonna also trace down the shoulder and the armhole. I'm gonna trace this down and straight across. I'm really just making little lines that we'll be able to connect later with the ruler. Just have my neckline. I have a dot where the shoulder needs to connect, so I'm gonna be drawing the line down to the shoulder, and then I put where my sleeve has the little slit here so that I can connect that over to the shoulder. And now I'm just gonna use my ruler and connect those points and cut out the shape that you've just drawn out. I'm adding this in from later. You don't want to add the seam allowance as you're cutting your fabric. Add it now before you cut. Typically I like to do 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter-ish seam allowance. So add that all the way around before you cut the pattern if you don't want to have to cut that as you're cutting your fabric. Once you've cut it out, it should look something like this. This will be pretty cropped, keeping in mind that there's still gonna be that ripping at the bottom. I think I'll leave it like that. Now we'll make the back panel. So what we'll do is trace the piece that we've just cut out exactly onto another sheet of paper, except instead of having a dipped neck, we're just gonna make it almost straight, a little bit of a U shape. This gives us 2 identical panels except for the neckline. They're one and the same, minus the neckline. So the sleeve here will be a little bit more complicated. I've overlaid this and I have traced it out, and I'm making sure that I'm leaving enough room on this side because I will want to add my seam allowance on this. So after I drew that, ignore this, you're gonna draw a nice straight line, so not from the curved bit, from this bit, a nice straight line that'll be the length of your sleeve minus the cuff. You can either measure that out or you can overlay the sleeve and trace it to the end. Next up, grab your ruler, measure how thick half the sleeve is. So this is at the end of it. So mine is about 5.5 inches here. Perpendicular to this line at a 90-degree angle, I will draw my 5.5 inches. There you go. And then from this point, I'm gonna wanna try and connect that. So it definitely does taper inwards. That's perfect. If you have a very nice long ruler, that'll probably be the way to go. I obviously don't. Okay, there's my sleeve. So now I'm gonna add my 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around. If you have a ruler like this, it really comes in handy because right now I'm just putting this bit on the line that I've already traced, and then I'm just using the outside of the ruler to create that line. Here's what it looks like after I'm done. Obviously it looks a little bit better than this because I didn't add seam allowance to this, but I added seam allowance to this. Don't ask me why. I did mark that this was gonna be cut on the fold. If you want to, with these panels, you can also mark that these are the sides that are cut on the fold. But that's pretty much all we need for now until we add the trim. But I don't really wanna do that right now. I kinda wanna to get to sewing. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the front panel. As you can see, the fold bit is on the fold, which will create two identical mirrored sides. There we go, and I'm gonna be repeating that with my two other pieces. Oh, and before I go on ahead, I should mention, make sure you cut out two sleeves, not just one. On the fold. Everything's on the fold. Now that I have all my pieces, I'm back in my temporary craft room and we're ready to get started. Now, typically I would tell you to draft the trim pieces as well first, but this is a me tutorial. So we're gonna do it a little bit out of sequence where the bandwidth is all on I can only draft and cut so much before I need to actually start sewing and seeing something happen. And then I can cut and draft again, other way around. Anyway, let's get started. The first step is quite simple here. We're just gonna grab our front and back panels. And we're gonna be pinning them together at the shoulders. So you can see the armhole is on this side. I'm pinning just the shoulders together. And this is what we're gonna be sewing. So I'm gonna be using a straight stitch with a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. And I'm just gonna be sewing that right sides together. Don't mess it up, don't do it. Here's a little bit of a better view at it. So I've just laid it on top of each other, and again we are just sewing the shoulder seam. And since I'm using a fleece, it is a little bit stretchy, so I do have stretch needles on here. This will also really come in handy when I'm doing the trim at the bottom. Cuff, it's a cuff, I keep saying trim, but it's a cuff. If you have stretch needles, use the stretch needles. Your machine won't want to eat your fabric nearly as much. And here is one shoulder seam, somewhat complete. I don't have a serger. If you have a serger, you can just serge the ends and bypass all the straight stitching that I'm doing. But if you're watching a YouTube tutorial about how to make a sweater, I'm guessing that you're like me and you don't have a serging machine. You can either zigzag the edges. This will just make sure that this doesn't spread apart. It just stays together and it does not fray. What I like to do on my beautiful Singer heavy duty, you can knock it if you want it, I like it. I go to a width of 4 up on my little wheel here. I set it to S2, and then I set it to this here, which is an overlocking stitch. So it's this red one because I'm on S2. That makes little triangles over the edges, and here's what it looks like. My needle's gonna go off the edge of it so that the little triangle that it makes goes off the edge and overlocks the stitch. So if you are doing a zigzag stitch, you will also make sure that you're doing the same thing where your zigzag goes off the edge, just off the edge, so that it holds that fabric in. Here is what the edge looks like once it's all done. So as you can see, it looks a little bit like a serger. Even if I don't explain it, I'm going to be doing this to every single seam going forward. So now that that is complete, we're gonna just clean up this seam a little bit. If you want to, you can iron it first, but what I'm gonna do is just top stitch this bit here that we've just sewed. So we're gonna top stitch this down so that it doesn't stick out and it's not uncomfortable when we wear it. I'm just going back to my straight stitch there. So now this seam is nice and flatly laid here, so nothing is sticking out, nothing's uncomfortable, and then the other side just looks like this. So here's that shoulder seam that we've just finished, and then this is the sleeve area. So we're gonna grab the shoulder area of the sleeve and line up the center with that shoulder seam. This is right sides together, and then grab your pins all the way along the edge. Time to sew. If you guys are not used to sewing curved edges, or this makes you a little bit uncomfortable to do, just take your time. Make sure you constantly readjust and check that your edges are perfectly lined up. If you're me, you're gonna wanna try and fix your posture because you look at yourself in the camera and then it's horrendous. Isn't that exciting? Do that on the other side and then go over your edge with a zigzag or an overlocking stitch like I showed you earlier. I also made sure that I would top stitch this seam down. Again, just look at how much cleaner this is on the inside, and it is so clean on the outside. The next step that you guys are gonna do is fold your sweater right sides together, and then you're gonna be sewing from the wrist all the way to the armpit, all the way down. So I have done it on this side. I started at the wrist here and went all the way down to the bottom. So it's just like a big L shape. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that to the other side. You guys know the drill at this point. It is straight stitch, then either a zigzag or overlock stitch. Isn't that fun? If you don't like the length of it, this is a good time. You can just put it on a chopping block and just cut. It's time to draft again. gonna wanna grab your stretchy knit fabric, and we're gonna make sure that we're cutting so that the long side is always on the stretchy side. Grab your sleeve pattern. This is the one with the seam allowance, so we're gonna go with the seam allowance and decide on which length we'd like to have the cuff. I'm thinking maybe a 2-inch. Yep, look at my measurements. This is why I can eyeball things, because I'm exact. So 2-inch cuff, 2 inches. And then because this is 2 inches, we're gonna be folding it. So I'm gonna add another 2. And then I'm also gonna be adding my seam allowance of half. Make sure that's nice and straight. Cut that. This is fold. Fold will be here the same way the fold was on the sleeve. Grab your tape measure, bring it around. So I know that this is 6.5 inches, which times 2, 13. And my back panel, which is 4.5 inches, which times 2, 9. So 13 plus 9, which is 22. The 22 divided by 2 is 11. I'm so sorry if this was not clear, but the reason why I'm dividing by 2 is because we're cutting it on the fold. So the short side will be on the fold, which was blurry in the other video. The wrist cuff is also like that. And that's why this is that neck measurement divided by 2, because it's on the fold. I just want the cuff to be 1 inch, so we'll go at 2 and a bit, and we'll draw that line across. So we could be done drafting here. If you want to do a band for the bottom here, I'm thinking because I like the length of this, I don't really want to add a band. I think I'm just going to hem this. But if you do want to add a band at the bottom, do exactly like we did with the cuff. Here's 1 collar, 2 wrist cuffs. And also guys, just keep in mind, if you don't like a loose sleeve, you can also make these so that they're a little bit smaller than the actual width of your sleeve when you draft up the pattern. You could do the same thing if you chose to add a cuff to the bottom of your sweater. You can make it a lot smaller so that it cinches in, just because this fabric is so elasticy. So we'll be preparing these pieces by folding them right sides together on the long side. And then we're gonna be sewing this shorter edge. Now this seam will be hidden on the inside, so it doesn't matter too much if you want to overlock it or not. I'm just gonna put a zigzag, and then it'll also be the exact same thing with the collar. So right sides together, folding it the long ways so that we can sew the small edges together. It's now time to part with my sweater. Okay, let's get started with the wrist cuffs. That's hard to say. Take this little piece out if you can so that you have a nice space to put your cuff. Turn the sweater inside out. Now grab a cuff, fold it in half like this. So that way we don't have the seam, or this part of the seam showing, which is what I was sort of trying to explain earlier. The raw edge of it will be facing upwards to match this raw edge, and I'm matching my seam here with the seam in the sweater. And then I'm gonna be pinning that into place just so that it doesn't budge. I made my cuff so that it's the same size as the sleeve. If you guys made the cuff so that it's smaller, just make sure that you give it a little bit of stretch as you're sewing. So don't stretch your sleeve, stretch the cuff so that the cuff stretches to the correct size that you have for your sleeve. And we are sewing 3 layers together, so just really make sure that everything is matching up. Take your time. It looks really nice once you flip it inside out, but again, because it looks like this, you know what I'm about to tell ya. Overlocking stitch. I'm gonna top stitch it down. And after it's top stitched down, this is what it looks like on the inside. We have a nice, cute sleeve. It's time to do the same thing with the collar, and it's literally gonna be the exact same thing. So fold it. Where's my right side? I'm also gonna repeat on the bottom if you guys decided to put a cuff on the bottom as well. Definitely make your collar smaller, not the same size, because there's a chance I might put a little like dart in it, but honestly it doesn't look bad. And leave it for now. Okay, if you did this to the bottom, congratulations, you're done. Or if you put a cuff to the bottom. Otherwise, we're just gonna do a super duper quick hem on the bottom. Folded it over once, about 1 centimeter, and then I'm folding it over again about 1 centimeter. This is just gonna be on a length 4 stitch because it's quite thick, and I'm making sure I'm not stretching it. And there you go, doing that all the way around. And when you do this, you just want to sew really close to the hem line. And here's what this looks like. This on the outside, this on the inside. Perfect. Yay! All right, We're on to pattern number 2 now, which is the shorts. So grab a pair of shorts that you like that fits you well. Keep in mind the stretch of them. If your fabric is not stretchy, you're gonna wanna draft them up maybe a little bit bigger, or go off a pair of jean shorts or something that does not have stretch that you know fits you. We're gonna start with the front here. Fold them like so, making sure that this part here actually sticks out properly. And we're not gonna do the seam allowance yet. We'll add that after when we fix the lines up. We're looking at this and we know that this is a rolled hem, like what I did on the bottom of this sweater. So if we want to do a rolled hem on the bottom, we're gonna need to add a couple of extra inches. Go ahead and add, you can measure, but you can also just eyeball it, at least an extra inch. Now, if you want this longer, this is the time where you can add more papers here. You can make it so that it's thigh length or whatever length that you want. Choose your inseam. The shorter you make it, the more righty up the bum it will be. So that bottom line here will pretty much be my seam allowance. I'll be cleaning this up later. If they were like mine and there's an elastic at the top, it seems like it's coming in on the waist. Don't do that. Bring it back out like so. And then draw a straight line across the top. Once you have something that looks like this, I don't know if you can even see because I used a pencil, you're gonna wanna start going in and adding your extra seam allowance. I have cleaned it up once I've done this, so my lines are actually straight now, and I've got my seam allowance on there. When you're doing the back, you will notice that when you look at the curve, this actually comes out quite a bit more. So I'm gonna need to put a seam allowance that goes out maybe an inch more, and that's just because, you know, there's more bum. And if you find that your shorts don't fit you 100% well, you want more room in the bum area, you can always make this piece a little bit longer. But basically we're just noting how much more we're gonna need here, and you're gonna be tracing out this exact shape. So we've traced out this exact shape, but once I get to this area, like I said, I wanna add about an inch extra. And so that's just gonna be in sort of a straight line out. And I'm gonna add some seam allowance to it and mirror it down. So my little line here is on top of my seam allowance line on my other pattern so that I can draw nice and straight down. Like that. So the band, grab a tape measure around your waist where you want it. So mine will be about 31 inches. We'll call that 33 just for contingency, which divided by 2 gives me 16.5. Mark where my 16.5 is. And I want my band to be about 3 inches wide, so we're gonna make it 6 inches long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with a little bit of extra for seam allowance, and all the way down. If you want to, you can skip this waistband and do a rolled edge instead, like this pant, how it has an elastic in it with the rolled edge twice. If you skip the waistband, definitely make this a little bit taller because you're gonna have to roll it in probably 2-3 inches. So just keep that in mind as you draft this pattern. I've gone ahead and I've cut my front and back pieces. Now keep in mind, fold your fabric so that you cut mirrored pieces. You're gonna want 2 of each. So you're cutting once, but on folded fabric so that it gives you 2 fronts and 2 backs. This piece, the waist piece, is the only one that gets cut on the fold. And again, this waist piece, you're cutting it on the stretchy side. Before we continue, I really want pockets, so let's draft up a pattern for pockets. Wide enough opening so that I can easily fit my hand and my phone. 1 line here, 1 line here. That, just over 5 inches. I know my seam allowance is 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch, so I'm gonna make that about that long as well. And then now I want it to also fit my phone and be deep enough for that. The only issue is, depending on how you do this, they might hang out. So there. And that's a pocket. Easy to do. And now it's time to sew. And these are gonna work up so quickly, I promise. I promise you. You're gonna grab your 2 front pieces. You're gonna put them right sides together if they aren't already from when you cut them. And we're just gonna sew this. So then overlock or zigzag, put the seam down. And then you're also gonna do it with your back pieces. So just this curved line. So essentially the crotch line. Okay, so this means that your front and back should now sort of look like this. Right sides together. We're gonna put this little crotch piece. So again, this is where we seamed. You have this little crotch piece that we're gonna match with this little crotch piece. Right sides together. like this. And we're gonna sew across that. So this is now what this looks like. And you guys absolutely know that I top stitched this down, because absolutely no way in life am I gonna have a crotch seam exposed in a pair of little booty shorts. But from a better angle, if you were to put them wrong sides together, so right side out, looks like this, like a short. The next thing we're gonna do is attach the pocket. Grab a pocket. This will be right sides together with your short. Not too close to the top if you're rolling your edge. Keep that in mind. I'm not, so I'm gonna put it about this far up from the top. Pin that into place. And then for this guy here, I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna put it in the exact same place. So this one is right sides together still, so it goes underneath this one, right? Because this is the right side. And I just wanna make sure that I match it. You can definitely use a ruler for this. You should use a ruler for this, because they should be matching up exactly. So this down. If your fabric frays a lot, feel free to do the overlock or zigzag, but we won't actually be seeing this seam. So what I'm gonna do is just give it a quick zigzag, and now we're gonna sew the sides together. So here's how we're gonna do it. So lay your shorts out with the right side upwards, and now we're gonna flip our pockets out like this, which you can feel free to iron, or you can also top stitch this down, fold the other half on top with the pockets out as well. Make sure you align everything specifically where the pockets meet up, and we're gonna be sewing, but here's the thing, so we're not sewing all the way through. You're gonna be sewing from the top till you get to your pocket. Then, because we need a hole for the pocket, you're gonna sew the outside of the pocket like this, and then down the leg. So of course I sound like a broken record, but repeat on the other side, then overlock or zigzag your edges if you want to, just on the sides, not the pocket, but you can top stitch it down. And now we're just gonna hem the bottom. So if you think that the leg openings are too big for you, which they sort of are for me, you can add as we hem an elastic. So I'm gonna grab my elastic and just wrap it around my thigh where the short's gonna hit. Not too tight, so it's about this long. And I'm just gonna sew both of these sides together. I'm gonna grab a highlighter and I'm going to mark, so obviously where I sewed it is the middle point. Then we have the middle point here, and then you can either fold it again to be exact, or roughly mark the other middles. The middle of the middle, if you will. So I've got 4 marks, and I'm gonna spread those evenly across the leg hole by sewing them on. And I'm sewing it really, really, really close to the edge. So now the leg looks like this. So I've just sewed it in 4 spots evenly across the leg hole. And now it kind of gives me a little bit of an easier guide when I go to do my rolled hem, because I'll just do it exactly on the elastic, and I'll make sure that my elastic is stretched out so that I'm sewing it to the leg. So we're doing a rolled hem just like I showed you with this sweater in the first place, if you remember how to do that. If you have your elastic, great. If you don't have the elastic, it'll be a little bit easier. And if you wanted to do an elastic waistband, you're gonna do this exact same thing on the waistband, and then you're done. Like I was showing you earlier, my edge is rolled in once and twice. I'm making sure that I am stretching out the elastic so that my fabric is nice and taut, and then sewing. That easy. If you do have the elastic, you'll have maybe a little bit more of a bloomer look, which I think is cute. All right, friends, we're in the home stretch. Grab the band, fold it so that we are sewing right sides together, the short end, and do that. It'll be the same as the cuff on the sweater. Now the same thing, we're gonna fold it wrong sides together so that all you see is the right side and we don't see the seam. Because this is stretchy, what we're gonna wanna do is pin it sort of like you did with the elastic. So we'll pin the back. Again, it'll be right sides together, so make sure that this is wrong side out so that we can pin this on the inside of it. So we'll pin the back to the back seam. So it should look somewhat like this. So you've got them right sides together on the inside. And now we know that these areas are gonna be areas where this is gonna have to stretch. Fun stuff. Let's sew. If you try these on and that the band actually fits you snugly around the waist, you can leave them like this. We're gonna make a channel to put either some ribbon, a lace, or an elastic so that they actually sit nice and snug. I'm gonna do it so that it is about 1.5 centimeters from the top of the waistband. And all we're doing now is just a top stitch. Make sure that goes all the way around. And then just repeat that, but 1.5 centimeters from the bottom of the waistband. Now we've created our channel right through the middle. And then it's up to you whether you want to make 1 or 2 holes in the front. Only through 1 layer. So here are the 2 little holes that I've cut in the front where my strings will come out. Just grabbing my safety pin, I'm putting it through one of the holes in the front. And now it's time to thread. Yay! Oh my gosh, okay, this is done. The matching dog sweater that I made is the Noah fleece sweater from Rosulika. I got it off of Etsy and it was very easy to use and it shows a lot of modifications as well, so I do recommend that pattern. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please tag me and let me know if you guys try either the sweater or the shorts. I know my tutorials aren't the most descriptive because we just go, but this is a step ahead because I actually drafted a pattern that I can reuse for myself, so not bad. I think if I were to redo this, for me, I would probably make this a little smaller and the cuffs not the same size as the bottom of the sleeve, but just a little tighter, and I would make this waist a little bit tighter as well, but it's totally fine. But with all that said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!